Welcome to Movies Are Life. I'm your host, Nathan Chandler. I'm taking my Benadryl and I'm working on my dance moves to prepare for this discussion of the 2005 film Hitch. It comes in at number 15 on the 50 best rom-coms list, and I'm inviting in returning guest Joe Kendrick to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I usually save this type of question for the movie musing segment, but how are your dance moves?
They are smooth like molasses.
Do you enjoy dancing?
Oh yeah, I get a kick out of it. I always wanted to dance, but I don't have any rhythm.
Right.
But I always wanted to be like Gene Kelly.
Oh, well, that's a lofty goal.
That was what I wanted, was like to learn how to do tap dance and that type of stuff. So that was what I wanted to do.
Well,
I think I might still join an adult tap dance class. I don't know yet.
But if you do, that definitely has to be something you have to post about on the regular, so we have to see that somehow.
Oh yeah.
Well, if you haven't seen Hitch before, it is a 2005 romantic comedy film directed by Andy Tennant and starring Will Smith in the title role, along with Eva Mendes, Kevin James, and Amber Valletta. Hopefully I said that last name right. The film, which was written by Kevin Bish, features Will Smith as Alex, quote-unquote, Hitchens, a professional date doctor who makes a living teaching men how to woo women. Unfortunately, while helping his latest client date the woman of his dreams, he finds out that his game doesn't quite work on the gossip columnists with whom he's smitten with. Columbia Pictures released Hitch on February 11th, 2005, so around Valentine's Day, and it was a box office hit, grossing $371.6 million worldwide. So with that set up, is this a movie, Joe, that you saw when it originally came out?
Yes, Lacey and I went and saw it in the theater, and then I want to say when Netflix, I don't know if Netflix, like the DVD version of Netflix, was coming out, so we might have gone to Blockbuster when it came out to rent a few times.
Okay. When did you and Lacey meet, and when did you start dating?
We got married in 2003.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So we started dating in 2002.
Okay. Yeah. I think definitely, I mean, we can jump into like what we like or dislike about this film, but it is a movie that just perfectly encapsulates the perfect date movie thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Especially, I don't know if people still around Valentine's Day tend to go to the movies. It seems like now these days, there were like a lot of movies this year that came out on streaming around Valentine's Day, which I think is interesting, like Your Place or Mine, or the new Alison Brie movie. But those were all streaming. It's interesting. I don't think there was really a Valentine's Day themed type of movie that came out in the theater. So, back then it kind of makes sense that this movie made so much money, because that definitely seemed, it used to be like movies and dinner. I don't know if people these days put those two together.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
No, it definitely, I mean, you're talking 2003. So, or sorry, 2005.
Yeah.
With the year. So you're talking movie theaters and malls are still booming, or at least the movie theater malls. So, you go get dinner and then go to a movie, or go to the movie and then go get dinner. So it was still a part of the date night life, like not the expectation, but I guess the norm.
Yeah.
And now I would say the streaming is the norm. If dinner and then watch something on Netflix or Hulu, and you don't even have to watch the same movie. You can be sitting side by side and watch 4 different movies at the same time.
Right. So I'm guessing you had a positive experience from seeing the movie back then. Is this something that you and Lacey have watched a lot since then?
I think we might have seen it 3 times afterwards, but
Okay.
like not. I watched the clips from time to time,
Hmm.
but not like I've not sat down except for our our conversation here, and even then, it was like I'm going to watch the parts I want to watch. I can't like I'll fast forward through certain parts just because I don't want to watch them. Like the lull parts for me of like the secondary stories that I didn't like or didn't I liked at the time, but they didn't. Um, Certain controversies just didn't make sense to me. Like the conflict didn't make sense.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a perfect assessment. I remember seeing this film. I must have seen it in the theaters when it came out, but it was a movie I bought on DVD shortly thereafter. So I must have liked it in the moment. Revisiting it this time, I think you hit it. You hit the nail perfectly of saying it's a movie that I feel is filled with lots of watchable scenes, but as a movie as a whole, it's kind of lacking.
Like if you took Hitch's and Eva Mendez's character out and just left Albert and Allegra,
Right.
it's a good movie.
Okay.
It, from my perspective,
Okay.
like watching their relationship blossom and the uniqueness of it, and the playing on the troops of you got Kevin James, who is not your ideal romantic lead, with a
Right.
woman who on the outside looks every bit of a romantic lead, but on the inside and personality wise matches Kevin James to a T.
Yeah.
And so you're watching these two on the outside, it's a juxtaposition, shouldn't work. But when you watch their personalities, it works. And you're rooting for them. Like, oh, he really cares about her. This isn't just, Allegra being a socialite and wealthy and such. Like, he's not just wanting her for her money or her looks. He's wanting a deep, serious relationship and respectful. Like, this is who he feels is his person. And you start to see that in a lot of ways she is this person, and really Hitch serves as the bridge to connect them.
Yeah. I think a lot of that storyline, it hinges on how you feel about Kevin James, I think, as far as an actor. But I agree with you. I like the concept of this movie and, that relationship as far as like, I think in this movie, it's said in some way that, Hitch says, I'm just providing the opportunity. And then it's kind of, once you have the opportunity, kind of go from there. And I think that's a really good assessment. And I actually really like the intro of this movie of setting that up, that, love is not just regulated to good looking people, which other romantic comedies are, but and I don't know your experience. I don't know like tons of like super famous people or whatever, but almost always, not always, but I think maybe people who have a certain status in life, you quickly, I think as you age and you get older, you realize that everybody's people, right? And, I think more people have more things in common than they don't.
If you look at today in the TikTok content creator world, there are instances where this type of relationship exists, and people, commenters and viewers, have a hard time with it, of like somebody being what they've deemed super attractive and then somebody else they deem not to be attractive, and they're like, why are you with that person? I would never be with that person. And they're like, that's why you're not with them and I'm with them. Like, this is my person.
Yeah.
And like, I'll say like Haley and Kendra on TikTok, couple, they're always like, Kendra can do so much better than Haley because Haley's very masculine. And she's like, no, this is my person. It's really, when you look at it, it's like really degrading to the other human being, of like,
Mm-hmm.
and degrading that love is only based on outlook.
Mm-hmm.
And there is, to a degree, that there is a natural attraction. But I think love, in the sense of like deep, affectionate relationships, goes beyond that into a deeper level. And so, back to the movie, that's what I felt like was happening with Allegra and Albert, was that there was a deepening relationship in kind of a transformation for Allegra of seeing somebody like Albert in the way that she would see her, or supersede expectations of how the media says she needs to, the people she needs to be around.
Right. Yeah. So the stuff between Will Smith and Eva Mendes didn't work as well for you?
So when I first saw it, I thought it was cute. Like, I love her character. I thought she was witty, snappy, sarcastic, everything that. And I think Hitch just has no idea how to. I think he knows how to coach people into doing those things, and I think that's part of the character, is that he doesn't know how to do that in his own life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that he can. Another metaphor, he can teach somebody how to throw the ball, but you bet he can't do it himself.
Yeah.
And so I think that drove part of it. But it was the conflict that, that inevitable conflict that comes in every romantic comedy that separates the couple. The conflict didn't make sense to me.
Yeah. It's very, I was laughing when I was watching this because Whitney, I'll give her credit for this. She was like, this kind of reminds me of How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, which we watched not too long ago. The same kind of like this journalist, and they're kind of both playing each other without really revealing their true motives. And then also, I can't help, I think it was made around the same time as like 13 Going on 30. She's a magazine editor in that. And I was like, what was the deal with the early aughts? And our fascination with journalists, and this is how you connect with people.
Never Been Kissed.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's fine.
Starting to run through them now, of 28 Dresses. Is that an early 2000s?
No, you're right. No, 27 Dresses. We just covered it, and you're right there. James Marsden's character, he's a newspaper columnist. So yeah. These days, I guess it would be an online, writer, not an actual print publication. But yeah.
The interesting thing with this movie is the difference is that she's not out, like she doesn't purposely run into Hitch as part of the story. That comes later.
Right.
She doesn't realize that that's the person, and she doesn't do that until her friend is hurt. Like her friend gets hurt by somebody who claims to be a client of Hitch, and it's not true. It's not the case at all. And that's where the conflict really bothered me, of you two could so resolve this right now, this speed dating scene.
Yes.
And you choose not to.
Right.
And then she realizes she's wrong, and she goes back to him, and he rejects her. And then you have the car chase scene, like the line, I think it was something like, love, that's what love does, you fall, or something like that, some cheesy, this whole third act could have just been avoided had you guys pulled your head out of your butts and just been adults.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I really like the scenes. I don't know if this makes sense because it's a movie. I like the scenes where they're just playing off each other and being around each other versus serving the plot and what's going to happen to them. So I thought the strength of this movie was the kind of back and forth banter between the two, even the little date excursions that they go on, just watching them together and them being together. I really liked, but yeah, I'm with you when it really starts thinking into especially the Vance storyline of, the seedy guy. And that's how it, I mean, it is very poor writing. So it's almost like I felt like there was someone who was writing on the dialogue side of things, and then there was someone on the other room who was doing the like structure of the story, and they didn't bother to check on one another.
Yeah. Or yeah, another way is like you know how the writer and has a one vision, and then you go to the studio, and the studio's like, oh, you got to add this in, you know, like
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, like somebody's doing something over here, but not communicating with somebody over there.
Yeah, and to his credit, it's leaning heavily just on the star presence in this movie,
Mhm.
and we can maybe go into a little of the discourse of the slap and Will Smith, but even before that all happened, it's undeniable that he has always been a Hollywood movie star, and I think a lot of what carries this movie is his charm and presence. And if you're in for that, you're going to love this. If not, you know, you might not be. I don't think it should be a reflection on how you feel about the movie, but you know, I don't think you can start this movie now post the slap and think of what happened and Will Smith. Were you able to separate those two at
Oh
all?
yeah, yeah. I mean, this is the slap. Like that's a moment of heated reaction,
Right.
poor, poor emotional intelligence, and with Chris Rock's new special out, that he kind of, I think he presents a different side from his perspective, and I think he just allowed those things like to exist, that we witnessed a legit conflict on screen.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean Will Smith's a evil, horrible person. It means he did something that was stupid and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and he did it publicly versus if this was you and I out at a restaurant and we're out with our wives and somebody says something negative about them and we get up and, you know, go outside for a conversation, you know, like it's not, to me, it wasn't it wasn't like he was spitting off racial epithets and, you know, slander, hateful speech. He did a wrong action that, you know, he later owned up to and
Mm-hmm.
and such. So for me, it was easier to separate than like watching Fletch, where, you know, Chevy has this reputation now
Yeah.
of being not a very good person. Before that, Will had a very good reputation, and I think the slap just kind of might have changed that a bit. But
Yeah. Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens over time. Like you, I mean, I couldn't help but like think of it probably because this was the first thing that I've watched with him in it since then. But it'll be interesting what time does as far as like because there's other scandals that have happened with celebrities in the past, and you know, it's kind of like, oh yeah, you know, I think like Hugh Grant comes to mind. He, you know, he was really able to shed what happened with Elizabeth Hurley and all that. You know, people will see Hugh Grant just as Hugh Grant now and stuff like that.
yeah,
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But I was able. I thought about that, but then it left. I could totally like soak it in the movie, but I couldn't. I couldn't help but think like, oh, I wonder, you know, even like 10 years from now, would that thought still seep in, if that
yeah.
makes sense? Yeah. But did you I was a fan of Eva Mendes in this film. I really liked her. I've always liked her as an actress, and I really liked her in this role. Did you like her
Oh yeah,
performance?
oh yeah. I thought it was like like I say, a breakout role, because I think she had some things before that. I think she was in Training Day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So she's been around, but it was like the first time you got to see what I felt like, and I'm a dude, so I don't know how much I don't. So it's maybe a skewed perspective, but it felt like her personality was shining more than her looks, if that makes
Right.
sense. Like
Oh yeah, for sure.
like it was, she's not a beautiful face. Like this is a human being who has a really strong, independent personality, and um it worked. Like I loved the sarcasm, I loved the confidence, I loved the, you know, looking out for your friend thing and such. So I loved her in this. I thought she was great.
She knows how to play comedy really well. And if anything, she just goes toe to toe with Will Smith, which is a lot of charisma on screen. And she's able to match wits with him, so to speak. So, yeah, I think she's really strong. And she's kind of done other types of roles like this, but she can definitely fluctuate, between the drama and the comedy of things. I mentioned him earlier. I kind of have my personal feelings about Kevin James. What are your feelings?
So I never watched King of Queens. So this
Yeah.
was, I think, his first real co-starring or almost lead role in a film. So it was different for me in that it was like he was allowed to be funny and kind of be himself. But it was controlled and it was purposeful. So he could play the goofy guy really well. The awkwardness, the needing an inhaler, the sitting in mustard, or spilling a drink, like the clumsiness. Versus when like you can tell that was a controlled environment versus when he's with Adam Sandler and Grown Ups, like where it's uncontrolled and just like, hey, go have fun.
Mm-hmm.
Which I like him in that too. So I like Kevin James. Here Comes the Boom is such a feel good movie with him in it, in a different version of himself, but I think more of a true version of who he is. But so I liked this. I liked him.
Yeah, I was a little kind of indifferent with him. There were times where and I think this is other movies too. Sometimes he nails it like perfectly. And in particular in this movie, the dance sequence, I mean, I think is like dead on. But then there's other moments where the flubbering, and like particularly the moment where he's like talking to her Allegra on the phone and he like slips on the marbles and all that, like just is like too much. But at times I think it's utterly ridiculous, but other times I think he matches the tone like perfectly, so I've always kind of seen him as like a more safe Chris Farley. It's like he's very Chris Farley like, except Chris Farley always had like an edge to him where it could get violent, and you never get that from Kevin James. But I probably liked him more in this movie than other things that I've seen him in. He's a little hit or miss, for me. But if anything, I think he's definitely tapped into. He knows what his strengths are, and he plays to that. And I think I never saw like Paul Blart Mall Cop or Zookeeper and those other things that he's in, but I think he knows his audience. He knows how to play to them, and he's fine with that, But I think this, like you said, I know King of Queens was kind of, it probably started before this movie, but this was probably one of his first like chances on the big screen. And definitely you can see how this role opened up doors to the other opportunities, because I would say like without certain aspects of this movie, it wouldn't have been, I don't want to say as good, but there are some pivotal moments that without him in it, and it's hard to think of somebody else that could have been in it,
Yeah, I'm like running through my head of like who could be in this role.
Right. And it's hard to think of somebody.
It's hard. Even on that question, it's hard to think of anybody else in the 4 lead roles. Like it's hard for me to think of somebody else as Hitch, like who could pull that off with such sincerity and such, charisma and care. And then I don't think anybody could have taken Eva's place.
Right. So Joe, what are your favorite scenes in this movie?
So there are 2. The dance scene is funny, like when he's like learning to dance, and which is hilarious, because I'm like, that's what I would be doing, is doing the shopping cart thing of like, oh I don't want that, I'm going to put that back up.
No, just keep your hands
clean
here, yeah.
Don't bite your lip, don't and I get it, because in that situation where they're going to dance, it's kind of a formal situation, so you don't want to but then she's out there like going crazy and having fun and loosening up, which is tells that she's comfortable with him, which I love. But that whole date scene at the at the at the at the art studio for Maggie's work that she's wanting to invest in.
Mm-hmm.
There are two things that I love about that stuck out for me were the interaction with the two friends where he was like, "Have you tried?" He's like, "Disgusting," and it's like not giving her a chance to talk. And Albert picks up on that and like kind of puts them in their place a little bit.
Yeah.
And then when he meets Maggie, he makes the assumption that Maggie is the female friend, and it turns out to be his assistant or whoever. And then like he's able to redirect, but it's still the same sincerity. Like everything he does in that scene is sincere. Yeah, he's coached on it and said this is how women, you want to be respectful, but like you really feel like he really does care about Maggie's work. And you say, so that's my favorite scene, or one of my favorites. And then the other is the date scene with date excursion where Hitch plans this huge thing of going out to Ellis Island. And so you got the breakdown of the jet ski or WaveRunner, and then he kicks her off. And the only part, like, it's the awkwardness of Hitch, like being Will Smith, you expect when he jumps in, like he jumps in like Will Smith, bad voice, iRobot Will Smith. What is the last person on Earth where he fights the vampires or the zombies or something?
Oh yeah. What the dog Legion?
Yeah.
I Am Legend. Sorry.
I Am Legend. Yeah. Like, and then he just like does this like whoa, like fall in. Which I appreciate, because it's like, why are you doing that? But then at the same time, character wise, so I like that all the way up to he's got this plan in his head and nothing's going as planned, and then he like picks out the name of her ancestor on Ellis Island, which is like you're gonna think could be this romantic deal, and it's like the worst thing that he could have done. But I like that.
There's these kind of dark moments in some of those date scenes that I really liked about this movie, and that made me laugh. I just not just that the date kind of goes awry, but that they kind of tap into some darkness into this film that it made me think. We were talking about the screenplay earlier. It kind of made me think of maybe there were some like darker moments in in the first draft of this thing, because that moment is definitely funny. Yeah, the WaveRunner scene is great. A lot of people remember the allergic reaction scene as well. That's always sticks in people's head. Watching it this time, I did think it was funny. In the same time, it seems completely like unnecessary. Like it's almost like a cheap laugh for the movie. I guess it gets him, to her apartment, which is the whole point of all that. But the swelling part of it didn't get me so much as just when he initially eats the food, and as he's trying to talk normal and he's having to like in the side a little bit. I like that more coming on than the actual, like when his face balloons up. And so it's a perfect example of one of those scenes that I think it's funny in the moment, but when you look at it in the context of the whole movie, it doesn't work really well. But as kind of going back to what we talked about at the beginning, this movie might be taken in better as like a couple of scenes go on YouTube than sitting down and watching the whole movie. I think the dancing scene by far takes the cake as the best scene. If anything, it reminds me of Dancing with Whitney or My Girls. Like if you told them just to contain, and they couldn't do it, they would break loose like he would. So
here's a question for you. Have you ever had a date go horribly wrong, like the Ellis Island or the Benadryl? the allergic reaction.
And, well, yes, kind of. We'll hit that. I'll tease that for a
Okay.
movie musing segment.
Okay.
I
Sorry.
have I have a good story for you. One of my favorite quotes from this was, I like Hitch has a lot of like moments where he kind of goes in these long monologues, which are like almost like the ultimate like greeting card, a lot of romance nuggets to pull from it. But I always liked, he says, like I always tell my clients, begin each day as if it were on purpose. I really like that. Not just in romance, but just in everyday life. I like that idea. And so, at the end, he, of course, looks at the camera and says, "Basic principles, there are none." I enjoyed that. Was there anything else? This wasn't an extremely quotable movie. It's probably more memorable for its scenes. Were there any quotes that stood out to you?
Just I pictured this going differently in my head, but that's like the only one that I can like. It wasn't quotable to me like Blazing Saddles or
Right.
other comedies like Old School or Euro Trip or Road Trip or American Pie or something else where I can just like quote it. There's nothing that really was like, oh, this quote was like awesome. It was just more of the scenes.
Right. Yeah. I also, as I've been going through these rom-com movies, I can't help but note that a lot of rom-coms actually reference other rom-coms in this movie. And I just wanted to throw out, like in this one, she's watching Jerry Maguire. I thought that was a kind of interesting note. And I forgot to mention on the last podcast about 500 Days of Summer, but there's a lot of references to The Graduate, which is kind of I don't know if you call it a romantic comedy, but it's hitting on the same theme. So I'm kind of wondering, to be a true rom-com, do you have to actually reference another movie in your plot?
Movie musings.
One of my first questions for you was, have you ever had an allergic reaction?
Oh no, I'm not allergic to anything.
Okay. I thought it was kind of untimely that one of the characters' name is Allegra in this movie.
Oh yeah.
It was clearly before the allergy medication became so popular. But I wonder if maybe secretly Allegra named themselves after this movie because of Hitch's reaction. But so this kind of ties into, you asked me about if I've had a date go wrong. It was early on dating with Whitney, and we went out, and I was meeting like a good set of family friends for the first time. And one of her friends at the time was married to a cowboy. Like he was like a cowboy, had horses, ranches, the whole thing. So if anybody knows me, I'm not like super good with horses and livestock. But anyway, we were out there, and kind of as you naturally do, hey, do you want to feed the horses, whatever. So he gave us these alfalfa sticks to feed to the horses. So we did that or whatever like that, and we came back in, and I remember, for whatever reason, I think I had a Tony Romo jersey on, so we must have been watching the Cowboys that day or whatever. And it very much was like Hitch in the movie, where when he was like, I kind of had felt like my eyes were kind of watering a little bit or whatever. And she kept on saying, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I was like, I think I'm allergic to hay sometimes. And then, it was one of those moments where everybody started looking at me like not normally, just kind of with their, kind of their teeth gritted and their eyes raised and that sort of thing. And it's definitely one of those moments. And they're like, I think your face is swelling up, Nathan. I was like, oh, is it bad? And they're like, it's kind of, and I remember looking in the mirror. I was like, dear Lord, like it obviously not quite as bad as Hitch's, but it was quite like there was a lot of swelling going on, and we got a Benadryl fairly quickly. So yeah, I tried to stay away from those alfalfa sticks.
I'll keep that in mind if you'll come down for the camp class and work day. Not to let you near the alfalfa.
Well, I can still be around horses and stuff, but it's just like maybe I shouldn't just grab a bunch of hay and just start like rubbing it on my face or throwing it around or anything like that. a big thing in this movie, Hitch talks about how important it is to be a good listener. Do you feel like you are a good listener?
I think so. That's a big part of my job.
Right.
Huge part of my job in what I do. And so people have said I'm a good listener, that they tend to open up and listen. And I've learned over time how to ask questions that make sure that I'm listening correctly.
Yeah.
So I think so, but other people would have to answer that question more than me.
More importantly, would Lacey consider yourself a good listener?
Would she consider me a good listener?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, you'd have to ask her. Like that's I have a hard time. We can get real for a second here. I have a hard time like with questions like that because it's like I think so, but oftentimes I've learned that what I perceive to be real may not be true.
Right.
And so that's always and two, I have a hard time like expressing positively about myself and my skill sets because I'm like, I see that I am, but you should ask other people and then they can tell you. So if anybody's listening to this on, Instagram or, like if you're on one of the social media platforms, if you just type in, yes, Joe's a good listener.
Hey, you're answering my questions well, so there you go. So because this movie is all about meetups, and we might have been mentioning Lacey more than she had ever cared to know about. I was just curious how you two met, and were you guys set up at all?
All right. So do you want the abridged story or do you want the true story?
Oh no, we'll see. Yeah, do both. So
all right. So the abridged story is that we met at a party.
Okay.
The true story is that we actually met 4 different times before that.
Okay.
And she remembers none of the 4 times. We even had lunch together, sat across from one another, had lunch together, and she does not remember it.
Just you two or with a group?
It was with like a group.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
she was, in her defense, and she'll say this, she was not there to see me. But I was there to see her.
Right.
So, I saw her, and then it goes back even further. I saw her walk across at OBU in the Geiger Center at the cafeteria. I saw her walk across, and she had rainbow hair. She had dyed her hair like red and white, and had a cabbie shirt on. And I remember seeing her, and I go, "That is somebody I want to get to know."
Yeah. And
so we ended up at a party together. My roommate invited her to a party, and he went with the intention that he was going to be the one to ask her out, and and such, and we all ended up drinking, and except for Lacey, she wasn't drinking anything, and he just ignored her for the whole night, and she's off by her couch by herself, and so I sit down. I'm a little, and we're watching Jerry Maguire, or no, not Jerry Maguire, Jerry Springer. Completely different.
Two different things
is on the screen. And Lacey had this like ring on her ring finger that was looked like an engagement ring. And I said, "So, you married?" And she said, "No." "You engaged?" "No." "Cool." And that was it for like the next 20, 30 minutes or so. And I said, "Are you bored?" And she said, "Yes." And I go, "Would you like to go home?" And she said, "Yes." And I go, "Well, I can't drive. Would you like to drive my car?" She said, "Sure." So she drove us back to the dorms.
Okay.
And then the next day, it just started from there.
Nice.
That's how we met.
Yeah, that's funny. I didn't know about you two meeting a lot before that. So
Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah, no, 4 different times before she remembered me.
That's funny.
Rom-Com rankings.
What do you give the chemistry here between Smith and Mendez?
I'd say 3.5, 4.
Okay.
Maybe more closer to 3.5.
Okay. Personally, I really liked the two together. I gave them 5 hearts. Like
Okay.
I thought the chemistry of them, like take the plot aside, like these two, characters being in a room with each other, like I completely buy in that they liked each other. In particular, the first scene where they meet each other in the bar and the way he kind of slightly, picks her up. I completely buy into them. I really like their dynamics a lot. Uh, so other plot aside and stuff, I mean, I think they're the ones that make the movie watchable for sure.
Okay.
So yeah,
That's interesting because I see them like, I feel like if we went to Hitch 2, they would not have stayed together romantically, but they would be best friends.
okay, yeah.
Like, so when I said, you thinking romantically, like to me, there was no real spark or romance. Like it was like these two are really going to be really, really great friends and best of buddies. Like,
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I kind of saw it more as like, he has purposely kept girls at a distance, and this is the first time he's been able to reveal his true self to her. And so, if anything, I feel like they would be together because I don't think he would casually date somebody after this.
Yeah.
No, but
that's fair. That's the fun thing about movies, man.
Right.
Different perspectives.
Yeah. The second category, the best friend. So we've talked a lot about Kevin James as Albert. There's also Julianne Emery as Casey, who plays the friend to Mendez's character here. So what's the heart ranking that you give this?
Oh, both of them were 5s.
Wow.
Straight up 5s on the best friends.
we're kind of flip flopped here, I guess.
Really?
So yeah, I gave it 3. Once again,
Okay.
the Kevin James, I think he really works sometimes just as much. I feel bad for the Casey character in this. I think she becomes a convenience more than anything to this plot, and I feel like she's not. I almost like even at the end where she gets set up at the end by that old lady, which I really didn't like that scene very much, but like I kind of had to like remind myself of who she was. So I'm like, oh, we're paying this much attention to her. But anyway, no, not because of her acting or anything. I just think that she kind of got short shifted in her role there.
Yeah. No, I can see that. I just, from my perspective, and again, this is what makes movies so fun, is that I felt like with Albert, Hitch like started off as a coach-client relationship, but really developed into a good friendship.
Right. Yeah.
And then Eva's like, she's taken up for a girl. That's her girl. That's her ride or die, so to speak. So that was my justification for ranking them so high. But this is why I like talking to you, man. You got so many different perspectives on a movie level. This is good.
I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the soundtrack to this movie, but I think throughout it, it had some really good songs. How would you rate the soundtrack here?
Honestly, I did not pay attention.
I think the soundtrack is really good because it's a very appealing type of soundtrack. The type of artist in here, it has a lot of kind of current artists like John Legend in it, but then it has some Temptations on there, Earth, Wind, and Fire. Always good, wedding staples. The song Love Train is in here. That like, it's one of those songs, as I listened to it, I was like, how come I know this song, even though like it probably doesn't exist on any playlist. It's very much almost like Will Smith. It's just very like accessible, like to all people, like everybody, everybody likes these songs. It's hard for me to think of you putting this on and not not dancing or moving, so to speak, being tempted to do so. And I actually was running when I was listening to the soundtrack, and all I could keep picturing is like, this is the perfect soundtrack to put on during a party when you don't know all the guests. So it's very much like a very crowd pleasing type of soundtrack. So I gave it 3.5 hearts. Probably not something I would listen to all the time, but very, very entertaining. It would be one of those, if it was playing in the background, somebody would be like, I like this song. I've always liked this song. Oh, who sings this one? It very much has that appeal. So, okay. So I think I might know how you feel about this, this category as far as the chase scene declaration of love. What do you rank the scene?
That's a 1. Maybe a 2. I'll be nice and put a 2, 2.5.
Yeah. I'm actually kind of with you on that one, 2.5, because I liked when he comes up to her apartment. I liked once again, I keep saying the same thing, but I liked the dialogue between them. I liked how they used the door as a framing device to keep them separated. So like I enjoyed that part, but then when it goes out onto the street, so to speak, and he gets hit by the car and all those things, you're right. It's not the strongest. So yeah. And it's like, oh, that was my brother-in-law, and then kind of a wink to the
I don't know
camera.
who this person is.
Right.
He's not going to love you like I do.
Yeah. Well, it even in the moment, like, because it had been a while since I've seen this, when he gets hit in the car and the lady runs out and she starts talking and I was like, wait, are we supposed to know who this character is? And then, I mean, they explained it that it's her sister, but it always felt very sloppy. Yeah. Okay. So the rewatchability of this movie, what do you give it?
3.
3.
Like,
Okay.
I can watch the clips all day, the parts that I love, but don't ask me to sit down and watch it again.
Yeah. I'm with you. Like, yeah. In the age of YouTube, like, you could Google a Hitch, funny scenes, and you could probably watch like maybe a montage of like 10, 15 minutes. You would love it and probably get the same out of this movie.
Yeah.
So I feel like 15 is a little high for this movie. But I definitely remember it having an impact when it came out. I just think maybe it's a product of that. There's been so many other rom-coms, maybe successful rom-coms that have come out since Hitch. It doesn't feel so much dated in the material, but it feels like it was definitely a movie of its time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you think rom-coms have changed since 2005?
I think there have, like, as we were talking about, like the previous podcast we've done, like 500 Days of Summer, definitely like a total like branch off, different avenue than this movie. So I think there's some rom-coms that have taken bigger swings, bigger chances. So even though maybe the structure seems real similar, I think some of the tropes that the rom-coms have become so well known for, I think some of the modern day movies have started to kind of try to get away from those tropes, but the cinematography, the look of it, the type of actors, I think have stayed the same. They're still trying to hit those beats, but being a little more realistic. Some of the plot points of these movies are like really out there, and I think a lot of the stuff now is trying to be a little bit more grounded in reality, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Recommendations.
Is there one thing that you've been reading or listening to that you would suggest other people check out?
So, 2 things. One, rewatch MASH. Always worth a rewatch.
The TV show or the movie?
TV series.
Okay.
Yeah. Movie's good. It just has some things that don't really hold up today. But the series itself, I'm on a MASH kick right now. I'm working my way through them in season 8 now. And so it's fun to watch the character progression. And when you watch it, you see how, like, when you first watch the series finale, you're really like bummed out and wondering how they got there. But when you watch it, you can see, it's like a roller coaster. You can see it's going up.
Yeah.
And we're all about to crack at some point. So that's an old show that I recommend. If you've not ever watched, sit down and watch it. Still applies to today in a lot of ways. But the new one that I really love is Will Trent.
Oh, okay.
On ABC. Like I am getting a real kick out of that one.
Okay. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, no, I went in thinking it's like another mentalist type show where this detective's like super smart, quirky and such, but like it's not that. There's a depth of background of like that abuse and growing up an orphan and the foster care system that made him the way he is. And so it's this unique, it's good. It's
Okay.
good.
Okay. Yeah. Good recommendation there. Yeah. My recommendation, it's kind of a slight recommendation because I don't quite know how it's going to end up, but we've been watching Daisy Jones and the Six on Prime Video. Both Whitney and I read the book. And so pretty much, I mean, in this year, so it's pretty fresh on our minds. And so the show is interesting to see how it, kind of interpreted the book. And it's about Daisy Jones and the Six is this rock band from the 70s and kind of follows, it's almost a documentary style where they're looking back on their story. And so if you like music, if you like especially music from the 70s, you'll like it. It's probably loosely based on Fleetwood Mac, kind of. And so, it's kind of been a little slow going. We're 3 episodes in, but there's a pivotal moment in the book that also happened on screen and in the 3rd episode. And that was a really good scene. So I think we're kind of, I can see the upward trajectory for the show. And so anyway, still kind of, I don't know if it cracked my top 10 at the end of the year yet, but I think especially if you like music, I think you'll be interested in watching it. So it Almost Famous, but
Okay.
but don't compare the two. Almost Famous is almost untouchable. So yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, next week, I'm going to have to freshen up on my French because we are going to discuss the 2001 international surprise hit Amélie, which came in at 33 on this list. Have you ever seen that movie?
Yes, we watched it in film class at OBU.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I haven't really seen it since it came out. I remember it, really kind of knocking my socks off at the time. So I'm really excited to watch it again because it's one of those like I loved it. I have to have this movie. I even owned it on DVD, and I don't know how many times I've seen it since when I bought it. So as always, check out moviesairlife.com for episodes, reviews, and more. It's always great to see you and chat with you. Thanks so much for coming on again.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, and keep working on those dance moves.
I'll do my best. You as well.
All right, man. Well, have a good one.
You too, buddy. Catch you later.
All right. Bye.